24 hours after the Marvel Snap meta has been shaken up, I thought it would be a great idea to look at what the data is reporting early on. We have a very, very small sample size at 57,000 games, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. So you absolutely have to take these tiers and all the data with a humongous massive pinch of salt. I'm going to try and break down the data and also just use my subjective opinion to kind of come to a conclusion about what the meta is going to be looking like. If the video is helpful, give it a like. We're going to start off by looking at Lammy's tweet. Lammy is the best player in Marvel Snap right now, in my opinion. He won a tournament today, and he has said Sandman ramp is the new king. That is quite a scary thought of a meta which revolves around Sandman. It means we could see a resurgence of Shuri decks because Shuri is very good against Sandman. Lammy's also mentioned in his tweet that Patriot is very good into Sandman. Thanos, Lockjaw looking like a 50-50 matchup in his opinion. Previously, it was very favoured for Thanos. And he's also said a very good card to beat Sandman decks is Iceman. So, with the inevitable surge of Sandman entering the ladder in the coming days, Iceman, Patriot, and unfortunately Shuri are going to be great decks at dealing with that. So big shout out to Lammy. I hate the idea of a Sandman meta, I must admit, and I hope it gets nerfed in the future. Sarah Surfer coming out on top. Only a 1.4% popularity over 57,000 games. That is an incredibly small sample size, but it's doing quite well. I've been playing some Silver Surfer myself today, and it's been performing reasonably well. There's less leeches to worry about. It does struggle against Sandman, but with a well-timed Cosmo and a well-timed Brood, you can absolutely beat Sandman decks with this one. Of course, I prefer my list with Rogue, with Kingpin. You definitely don't have to play the Rogue, but certainly the Kingpin. Jeff the Baby Landshark, also a solid addition into this deck as well, in my opinion. Okay, Discard somehow making the top cut. Again, this is just evidence not to read into this too much. 200 games on this particular deck with a 60% win rate seems to be carrying this, as it's got a popularity of just 1.7%. And yeah, it's looking like a pretty interesting build. Storm replacing Lockjaw. Now, definitely Lockjaw is going to be a lot worse in discard decks because a lot of the time you would want to play a couple of swarms into the Lockjaw in one turn. You can't do that anymore. So Storm seems like a good way to go with Dracula. This list does look a little bit wonky. The Wolverine in particular, I think, could go. Something like a Swordmaster, Moon Knight, or a Gambit seems like a nice addition into this one. Okay, moving on to tier 2, and again, let's not really read into the tiers too much because this is all going to get jumbled up in the coming days once the meta settles. Darkhawk, pretty popular at 8.1%, so a pretty good sample size on this compared to the rest of the decks. And yeah, it's doing pretty well. Nothing really too much to say about that. This deck is very good into Silver Surfer if Silver Surfer does become more popular. It's very good against any deck that plays Storm. It should be okay against Sandman, but not spectacular. Dinosaur can definitely help you win a lane, and the Cosmo is also a nice addition at dealing with Shang-Chi's. Doomwave, I've been playing a lot of Doomwave, video coming soon. It looks like it's doing quite well. Jeff the Baby Landshark also okay in this deck. The new leader is a consideration in this one as well. Goose is not in this list, which is an absolute crime against humanity. Put Goose in this deck for the love of God, please. If you're playing Doomwave, it belongs. It really, really does. I have my own Doomwave deck coming out in the next day or so look out for that. Patriot, and Lammy mentioned Patriot by name as a way of dealing with Sandman. So I think we can definitely expect to be seeing more Patriot. I also think Patriot, these lists have not been refined massively. It's a deck I'm going to explore in the coming days and we'll hopefully get a list for you. I really love Abomination in these, but Ultron definitely helps deal with Sandman. Okay, Sarah Control. Lots of different ways you can go about building Sarah Control. My personal favorite is with Bast for sure. And Hitmonkey. This one does have Hitmonkey as the most popular version. I wouldn't read too much into this one. I posted my version of Sarah Control yesterday. It's performing quite well. Pretty low win rate, but decent average cube rate, as you might expect. It's going to struggle, I think, Sarah Control at the start of a patch because the decks aren't that greedy. I would be expecting to see more Shuri decks come into the meta with the resurgence of Sandman. And then also, if there's a lot of Patriots, I would expect these decks with Enchantress and Zabu perhaps to be the way to go for Sarah Control, because Zabu is going to reduce the cost of your Shang-Chi and Enchantress, and you can Enchantress the armor and Shang-Chi the Red Skull, and you can of course Enchantress the Patriot against those Patriot decks. Seems like a pretty solid deck. Electro ramp, quite far down, huge popularity at 13.6%. It has a huge win rate of 54.1%, but the average cube gain isn't that high, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of the time you know exactly what's coming. The most popular version of this is playing leader, which I definitely think is a huge addition to this one. The lack of Chavez in this deck is making me a little bit sad though. You can't really go wrong with Electro ramp. A Hitmonkey deck coming up next. I'm going to assume that this is some kind of bounce deck if it's just coming onto its own. Low game volume. Not going to talk about this one too much. Galactus, a popularity of 11.2%. I've been playing against an obscene amount of Galactus over the past couple of days, or the last day I should say. Low win rate, but pretty high average cube rate. What I would expect. One thing that Galactus is going to struggle with this season is the popularity of Sandman decks. Because they play Aero, you are going to really struggle against those decks. So the fact that it's got a 50% win rate, over 50% win rate, and there's so much Sandman is very impressive for Galactus. I've always thought this is a very underrated deck, and I think it continues to be so. Some kind of lockjaw deck, still looking like it's doing okay. Not going to talk about this one too much. The stats aren't that impressive, to be honest. It got nerfed. Bounce is looking quite good as well. This one has a Spider-Man and a Professor X. Low game volume again. We've got some kind of like junk control deck. Someone, one list here with 1,200 games, which is an insane amount of games already. It's some kind of Thanos deck. Here we go. The first Thanos deck we've seen. It's defined as junk, which I'm not necessarily sure I would agree with that, but there we go. Very high percent win rate. Looks like Thanos is still popping off with a 57% win rate on that one. Thanos Death looking okay as well. Thanos Zoo looking quite okay. Of course, these decks being impacted quite heavily by the nerf to Lockjaw. You still definitely want to play Lockjaw in these decks though, no doubt. A Sarah control deck with the Hazmat and Luke Cage. This is more like a highlight reel kind of deck. You could just get some big 8-cube wins, but it's so inconsistent, you're better off playing normal versions. Interestingly, Shuri is looking like it's struggling quite a bit down in the C tier at the moment early on. We've got Deathwave making a bit of a comeback with Leader. I am definitely of the opinion that the Doom decks, the Doom Wave decks, as opposed to Deathwave, we're basically the same deck without Death, are going to be superior. But I'm definitely not surprised to see this deck make a bit of a comeback and doing okay. Shuri then is looking like it has a pretty high win rate, but low average cube rate, which is interesting. This is still playing Cosmo, though. This deck should get a lot better when Cosmo gets cut. You can add Sauron in there, for example, with Ebony more. There's all sorts of things you can consider doing. I think Shuri's going to make a real comeback when people realize it's still pretty good, but it's going to be maybe like a tier 2 deck or so. Some kind of destroy deck here, which I'm not going to talk about. Bast Patriot, I think we can all agree this is not the way to go with Patriot. We got baited into thinking it was. Mr. Negative, I definitely want to talk about. Mate, I think Mr. Negative is better now than it's ever been before. I'm going to be posting my video on Mr. Negative tomorrow. I had a very big amount of success with Mr. Negative. Leech is no longer impacting this deck anywhere near as much because you can magic on 5 now and you can't get leeched before that. And what that means is that on turn 6, all of your 0-cost cards are going to have their abilities removed, so you don't want to play them. But who cares, because on turn 7, their abilities are going to reappear. So Leech is nowhere near as big of a threat anymore. And also Leader change is a big buff to Mr. Negative. So look out for my Mr. Negative deck tomorrow. I did share one yesterday on my top 12 video as well. Cerebro 3, this is a deck I am very keen to check out tomorrow. I haven't played any of it, but I have been told it is pretty flipping good. Jeff the Baby Landshark is a great addition to this one if you do have the card. And with Iron Man, with Spider-Man, with Professor X, you can do some saucy things with Valkyrie as well. Some kind of generic control deck, which I won't talk about too much. We will take a look at a few of the decks into the low game volume tier because obviously we're so early on in the season. Dracula Dump performing quite well, sort of Dracula Zoo. Some kind of a Tuma deck, very low popularity but performing okay as well. Really nice cube rate actually on Dracula Dump, so this definitely seems like one to experiment with. Zabu Dino decks, which we kind of had one above earlier, just these kind of decks are very solid. We've got Hella, which I've seen Jeff playing, Move doing okay, Kazoo doing okay on reveal. And Jeff the Baby Landshark also does get a mention. The most popular version of this is a very generic looking mid-rangey Silver Surfer weird deck. But Yeah, cool. Jeff, definitely nice in Silver Surfer decks, and I think it's a very, very good card. Okay, that's a look at the very, very, very early data. We'll take a look at it again next week after the weekend. If you guys have watched this far, please give the video a like. Don't forget, on Saturday, there is going to be a big Marvel Snap LAN tournament happening. It's going to be broadcast live on my Twitch channel, and we're going to get a really good idea of what the tournament meta is going to be looking like for the rest of the month. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.